Thank you, Jeremy. Wow, it's bright up here. Welcome everyone. I'm Kurtis Lindqvist. I'm the CEO of LINX. It's fantastic to be back in person again. We seem to be doing these meetings, one virtual, one in person. So hopefully this is done with virtual meetings and we'll now be back to in-person events. It's great to be back in Manchester. I can't believe it's only 4 months, or was it 4 years since we were here last time? It was long enough for me to get lost between the station and here anyway, but it's fantastic to be back here. So, on to the CEO update. Just briefly about statistics, where we are, we continue to see a lot of growth across the various metrics we have. I'll come back to some of this in a few slides. We still have one 400 gig port. There's been some interest by more networks to move to 400, but I think that's also held back slightly by supply chain issues. We continue to see new applications. We have 24 so far, which is quite healthy, I think. Last year was quite a high number compared to what we had expected. So we continue to see that growth across the board, and especially in connected edge capacity, we continue to see really healthy growth in that, which is very exciting. That didn't happen. There you go. Across the various lands, again, there's not much to say. It's up and to the right. And I always struggle to say something interesting about this slide, to be honest. But we have seen quite a lot of traffic peaks in recent. I think the most recent one was the football. What was the Champions League semi-final or final? Semi-final, Richard is nodding. That generated the new traffic peak we saw. Also, Jeddah IX in Jeddah is doing really well. It's one of the fastest growing regional IXs we have. It's been competing for the, in traffic-wise, largest IX in the Middle East. We're in tight game with another IX there, and we keep overtaking each other. But that's very positive to see that level of growth there as well, and we have quite a healthy pipeline to growth in Jeddah as well, so that's very exciting to see. As is true for other regional IXs as well, that we have seen some new members joining in Scotland, for example, is always, I think, is quite interesting. We see networks who join one of the regional IXs as their first IX, as opposed to necessarily being London, who is the attraction point for a lot of new members joining. We also, I think, what I want to talk about a little bit is the new peering services. So from 1st of January, we separated our port services from peering services, so you can buy a physical port with any number of services on top of that physical port. And one of those services is peering services. It can also be private VLAN or cloud or any of the other LINX products. But what's been interested in this is that we have, just to see how the uptake was, because when we launched this on January 1st, we also made available other peering services speeds than the full port speeds. And we had quite a bit of uptake on this since then. So we had 36 members who migrated from a 1 gig physical port service to a 1 gig peering service, and I think there is quite a few in the pipeline. I can't quite remember the number, but so that's the people who migrated. But also a number of members have gone from, for example, 1 gig to 2 gig services. So we now have 30 of those. We have 13 5 gig services and 15 30 gig services, which is on a 100 gig port. So there's clearly been some success of these other services to see as a migration path, and that was what we wanted to create for this, was a smoother migration path from 1 to 10 gig, but also from 10 to 100 gig. For members to utilize this service, and it's quite exciting that in the first, this is essentially the first 4 months, because it's this by April 30th, I think. We've seen this uptake, so it's quite looking quite positive, and a lot of this happened actually in the very first month. So in January there was a queue built up from the announcement to when we launched the products. So that's very positive to see. I mean, that it shows that this actually did deliver what we had hoped in the migration path. And some staff news. We've had one new starter in the product owner, so Simon Philpott even. We had 2 leavers in Garima and Shabazz, and we actually have 4 vacancies and we have a compliance and monitoring and assurance manager. That sounds very, very complicated, but this has to do with something I'm going to come to in a few slides. A product manager, a DBRE, and an SRE role. So if you know anyone who'd be interested, then please go to the LINX website. The annual report was released this morning, I think. Well, it was released this morning. So you can all have a look at that. It's on the LINX website. The financial presentation will be done by Malcolm tomorrow before the GM. So you'll have some more, which is the most part of the annual report. We have done the format slightly different this year. So it's longer, for lack of a better word. It's a lot more detailed, and we talk a lot more about our outlook and the business interests. It's actually, we also made a conscious decision this year to make the annual report much more aligned to the statutory accounts we file. So you'll actually see that there's a lot more financial information and a lot more of the business outlook and the business sentiment that we as management and board see for LINX. So, but that's all on the website for you to go have a look at. One other thing that happened in the last quarter you might have seen is that we received our 27,000 certification, and we also recertified for FSQS. And I can't remember the acronym, but essentially we are a certified supplier for financial services. Now, both of these certifications is because we're seeing an increased demand from members around us meeting certain criteria and process standards in order to remain suppliers or be suppliers. And this for us is a better way for us to enable this. And we're also aware that some members might want to go even beyond this in documents. Now, meeting all of this is actually quite a costly side for us, and we have to think a little bit about how we continue to supply this, and that's something that Jen's team is looking at. But at least having these certifications, we will meet some of the criteria that some members are asking for. And this is becoming quite a recurring request into the team about documentation or proof for various processes or compliance. In addition to this, and I didn't actually put this on the slide because it doesn't really have a logo, but we have also published an ESG policy on the LINX website. You can also that's also something we get asked about quite frequently in compliance and adherence to some of these standards and some of these policies. And again, this is to meet the need of the membership that they need in terms to remain either compliant or with their regulatory demands or internal policies. Something completely different. We've been discussing a lot about LINX communications with members and how we communicate with members. So historically, as in before the pandemic, we actually always had a very high touch, if you want, as in we talked to at least all the members once in a year. Sorry, not all the members, with more than 50% of the members at least once throughout the year in one shape or form or the other. And obviously then this COVID thing happened, and we lost a little bit of that or at least the nature of that might have changed. So it might not have been as many personal sit-down interactions as we had in the past, because obviously none of us, I mean, we haven't had any interaction for a few years, right? So, but this is something we'd like to get back to, and that we actually value very highly, is to have this interaction and actually have a good relationship with the membership. And this shouldn't be just once, but throughout the year, we want to make sure we talk to as many as the LINX members as possible. But also not just the number of quantity, but also how we interact and the quality of that interaction, so that we can do a takeaway from those interactions and what we learn from talking to the members. So a lot of these interactions are either through sales or individual meetings or you contacting the NOC, the membership survey, mailing list. These are all sort of tends to be touch points with members that we have today. And some of them are, of course, much more in-depth, like a sales or individual meeting, than necessarily following up in private to mailing list posts. This is a rather less intense interaction, perhaps. So there's a few things we want to do. One is that or Jen's team is the sales and the marketing teams are setting out to do regular member interviews. So we're going to have a number of members throughout the year that we will pick at random that we'll interview and actually sit down with and talk to what they want to have from LINX and what problems they see, what can we do to help those help members in the future to have a much better understanding of what drives the members. We're also, so that's probably on the very in-depth side of how we do these follow-ups. On the other side of this, and in addition to this, which is slightly different there, you might have seen that if you interact with LINX now through any of the ticket systems, so the NOC queue, sales, finance, any of the other, sales and finance is just about to be launched, but for a NOC, you can actually provide feedback on the service you got from LINX. So this is something we actually pay a lot of attention to and value highly. So please do give both positive feedback, by the way, and negative feedback. But the positive feedback is also very important for us to understand what do you value. It's very often that you often think about to give negative feedback of what you don't like. But for us, trying to act on this, actually understand what members value and what they think we do good is actually as important, if not more important, to know that we're on the right track, right? So this is one of the things, but the interviews is something that we really take on. But we're also discussing if there are other ways that we can interact with members, there is, this is a rather broad topic, and we'd just like to hear some feedback from membership. Is this that mailing lists has been there for a long time and it continues to be there, but we also increasingly hear from members that they don't necessarily think that mailing list is the way that they communicate anymore, and that there is limits to what mailing lists can do and how you can interact. There's also, we have to understand, there's a lot of members who are not particularly willing of having engaging with LINX in public for a number of reasons, be it internal policies or other shapes, and they interact with us directly instead. And that's great, but we also like to capture this somehow and qualify this. So we're actually quite interested to see if there's other ways of communicating with members that you'd like to have, the private TikTok channel, the whatever Instagram or whatever the cool kids use these days. Don't look at me. But any form of other alternatives way you think would be a useful way to interact with LINX and would make it easier for you to interact with us, that's something we'd like to hear about. So either come see me in a break or tell one of the teams if you have any thoughts around this. It'd be great to capture more around this of how do you think we can improve this communication. And that was all I had. There's going to be a little bit more in-depth on some of this topic later on throughout the day. And I think Richard's doing a stand-in on the product slot, so you'll get a little more exciting stories there that I didn't cover today. Any questions from me, though? Any thoughts, comments? Oh, Simon. No.
Hi, Simon Lockhart from Bogons. I don't know if this is just perception or otherwise, but we see an awful lot of port cancellation emails come through, and the majority of them seem to be for LON 2. Is there a trend downwards for LON 2, or you talk about growth on your slides, but you don't talk about sort of losses?
So we actually track losses very closely. Let's address the wider point first. Any member who leaves LINX, we actually do an interview. We actually find out why they left LINX, and we do keep statistics to make sure that there is no trends. We do the same when networks leave particular lands. We do ask them, why do they leave? Is there any trend reason we can start seeing behind this? And there isn't. We haven't picked up on any particular reason. I think when it comes to, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but when you put the two top reasons, I think from members leaving LINX, the number one reason is still mergers. And the second reason, which is maybe obvious, is not enough traffic, but I think that's been the case for at least as long as I've been with LINX and not longer. So there has to be a change in those two reasons. Those are number one, top two reasons why people leave LINX, right? And so on the broader scale, that's not the case. On LON 2 particularly, I don't think we're seeing the growth that we would like to see, but we're not seeing a massive decline either necessarily. I mean, I think it's also, I think you have to be careful when you talk about port cancellations, because there is also consolidation, right, of ports into more higher aggregates, etc. So it's a little bit apples and pears. You know, if you question, would I like to see more growth in LON 2? Absolutely, and it's something we discuss at the moment, and hopefully maybe by the end of the year we'll come back with something we can talk about more about what we're thinking about that. But we're not seeing. I'm also not seeing LON 2 going away. So. It's a good question, though. Any other questions? No? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Kurtis.